All right, I think we have everybody back from the other breakout room. So great. Felipe, why don't you just take it away?
All right. Yeah, you can leave the sharing there. That's totally cool. It's beautiful. It's gorgeous. We love it. I've got a time box myself counting down as we go. So we stay in our time box. If you missed it, if you're just joining now, welcome to the Agility and Construction Conference. You're just in time for an amazing panel discussion on lean integrated project delivery. We've got some special guests in here today. My name is Felipe, Engineer-Manriquez. You can see my full bio at the agilityandconstruction.com speaker/Felipe and all my last name after it. But I'm a best-selling author, international keynote speaker, host of the EBFC Show podcast, hence the special microphone. Free of charge, by the way. This agility is just priceless. Oh, no crickets there. Let me get to the right place. Just in case we need any kind of sound effects, which I told James I'd keep to a minimum, Jessica. So I'm going to hands off the soundboard. I work currently as the project delivery services director at the Bolt Company, in addition to having a podcast and having fun at conferences like these. We are so glad you're here. Ladies and gentlemen, as we're talking, as you're thinking, I will take the full responsibility of monitoring the chat for your questions, and I will bring your questions to James and Jessica at the end of some panel conversation, dialogue, maybe even some debate at the right time. So feel free to exercise any questions at any time in the chat. I'll just scroll up at the end. We will have time for live Q&A as well, but we will give precedence to those of you that want to exercise your ability to use your fingers on your keyboard in the Zoom chat. I'm going to quickly introduce Jessica. Just for those of you joining that you don't remember, she's the Director of Integrated Project Delivery for Merck. Jessica, you and I have been friends for a long time, known you forever. Can you give people some more information about your background, where you used to work, where you're working on now, and feel free to drop that $1 billion number on us a few times as you tell us about yourself.
Okay, well, let's see. We'll start. It's kind of a cyclical journey. I actually graduated from Penn State Architectural Engineering, went straight to California. So moved from Pennsylvania to California, and had the opportunity to be in the right time, right place, working for Southland Industries, for those familiar in that area, as a project manager, delivering all sorts of construction projects. We were in our lean journey already, dabbling in less planner system and things 5S, mainly internal within our sphere of influence, and kind of teamed up with others that were frustrated in the industry around how projects got delivered, got connected with the likes of Sutter Health and the Bolt Company and DPR and HGA Architects and many others who wanted to figure out a better way to deliver projects. I had the opportunity to, I don't even know what the sound effects mean. I had a great opportunity to be the project manager on the first integrated form of agreement contract. So having done what you would consider traditional projects, mostly design build, some plan and spec, all confrontation based and stressful, and moved on to an IPD project and realized the benefit of a new way of delivering work in a more positive way. I think one of the questions you're asking of us is, why do we choose IPD? And what I think about most is I love what the built environment provides. I love the architecture and construction and creating spaces that make people productive, efficient, happy, excited. And it breaks my heart when I see the trends that we saw earlier of how dysfunctional this industry is, because I grew up in a household that had construction workers and family members, and I know what they put into it with their heart and soul of delivering product and solutions. And I think we can do better than what we're providing them in the systems that they're allowed to succeed in or prosper in. We failed miserably as an industry to provide the work environment and the outcomes that people need and want. So I spent a lot of time in Southland, 20 some years, doing not just integrated project delivery and coaching projects, but also some internal operational excellence opportunities. A stint in learning and development, which I think has suited me well for developing teams and developing people, because we learn differently as adults. During the pandemic, had the opportunity to make a huge career shift and go from the trade partner side to the owner side. Moved over to Merck, back to Pennsylvania, as Felipe mentioned, working as an integrated project delivery director for an organization that is trying to shift how we deliver our projects to be closer to IPD. And we've got currently about a $20 billion capital projects program globally. The magnitude of that is immense compared to what that money's just getting burned sometimes. It's more like this. But we can talk more about that. So now I work with a team of folks that are focused on as we define them, transformational projects, and applying a lot of the aspects of lean project delivery and integrated project delivery to the portfolio, and developing our internal partners, our internal project delivery teams, our external partners, to look in a new direction. Did I hit on everything you needed me to hit on for this portion?
You did, Jessica. Thank you so much. I don't know what that other sound effect was. That was totally random. I'm not sure if it was actually me. It could have been anybody. Could have been anybody. It's a wide open conference. Thank you for that background. People, if you're listening in and you're hearing Jessica's story, her start at Penn State is incredible, because Penn State just has so much. I can't say enough good things about Penn State and the people that come out of the programs there. So Jessica, more for you and I to talk about later. Got some cool friends and some amazing stories. People coming out of that area. Got mad respect for your journey and where you've come through. Now I'm going to introduce, it's my honor, my pleasure, to introduce another one of my great friends, Mr. James Pease, the current Executive Director of Design and Construction for the University of California, San Francisco Health System, currently leading teams in IPD for complex capital projects. That's a mouthful, James. I like that long title. He's also a licensed GC. Don't hold that against him, people. Do not hold that against him. And he is the, in addition to serving in a volunteer role for the Lean Construction Institute, he's also the executive director of leanipd.com, one of my favorite websites to go learning about integrated project delivery in the world. So, James, please give us some background information and let us know more about yourself.
Thanks, Felipe, and great to be here. I'm a little intimidated by Jessica's intro, so let's see what I can come up with.
I'll judge it with my hands at the end. So
I dropped out of aerospace engineering. I figured there were easier ways to get on a plane than know how to design it, and I studied management science and engineering, and had no idea what I was going to do with that. Landed in a construction role at Stanford Hospital as an owner's rep. And pretty much everything that we did there was design, bid, build. So I had no formal construction training. That was my introduction to the industry. I landed after Stanford at a public agency. And so we did design, bid, build, but not only that, we had to advertise in the paper. So we got, like, anyone that wanted to submit a number could submit. And the height of collaboration there was pre-qualifying contractors before they bid. That was kind of the secret sauce. That was it. One of my first jobs as a project engineer, we bead blasted the floor of a hospital inside, had operating rooms all around it. We were renovating. We bead blasted the floor, and you could see through the floor to the floor below, which is not supposed to happen, especially in California.
Oh.
That led to $1 million change order for seismic retrofits within the project area that were designed, during construction. This is an OSHPD job, and it was a $4 million project, probably the equivalent today of a $50 million project. So it had like a 25% change order on it that was not discovered during design. There was a $2 million claim. So you're thinking of 50%, a claim that's worth 50% of the contract value. It was a year late. We value engineered out the last phase of the job. So we never delivered the last part of the project because we couldn't afford to. Thank God I left and went to another company, but I think that job was in arbitration for another 3 years afterwards. So that was a good taste of how not to start and run a project successfully. I took meeting minutes. I had the joy of transcribing books of certified payroll for the claim, really value added work for the owner to pay me to do that. So then I went to Sutter Health and I worked on some CM at risk projects with early design assist. This was at the beginning of building information modeling. So we were essentially paying people to learn on the fly how to do these things. And it went better, but I'd say the job still finished a year later than we thought, and probably $100 million more than we had in the budget. It's possible that job was more underfunded than over budget. In hindsight, it's one of the best jobs we've ever built on a cost per square foot and a value basis. But at the time, we thought we were going to lose our jobs because it was over the budget. From there, I transitioned over to, after Jessica, started at Sutter Health working on integrated project delivery. I worked under Dave Pixley, who essentially gave me the IPD contract and said, here, you have to use this from now on. And I think he said that to everyone. I'm the only one who thought he was serious and took it home and read it and tried to figure out how to use it. So in 12 years at Sutter, I worked on 20 IPD projects where I was the PM from start to finish. The first one that I finished was the end of the job. We met our schedule, which everyone said was impossible. We gave money back. We paid the team a bonus, and we all got together and had dinner at the end of the job and talked about how much we wanted to work together again. And I was like a drug. I was like, that was cool. I want to do that again. This is way more fun than the job I described before, where you're in arbitration or litigation and you literally hate the people and you don't want to work with them again. I mean, you don't even want to see them on the street. So that was kind of a radical eye opener for me that things could be done differently. Somewhere along that time, it's probably Jessica that invited me to the Lean Construction Institute. So I started going to these monthly meetings, and it was probably more the camaraderie of just finding people that were also interested in doing things differently. There were not a lot of people like that, but that was like the group where everybody was, and everybody there was thinking outside the box and trying to do things differently. And so I got really motivated by that. It's also when I started remembering my management science. I'm like, wait a minute, I studied this like 15 years ago. I don't remember it, but I studied stuff like this. Now I'm on the board of LCI. I think we have a long way to go, but I think between integrated project delivery, which I'd call aligning the business deal and creating a system where people excel when the project goes well, and everybody kind of hurts is not the right thing, but everybody feels that if somebody makes a mistake, and what that does, it makes everybody work together to move forward. Coupled with lean practices, I find construction to be a very rewarding place to work. And I think that we can make it a lot better. I think we're losing the battle with tech workers, and the people coming out of school now don't think of construction as being a place to work, but we're a huge industry, and there are jobs for every type of person, every type of skill set, from technology to working with your hands to engineering. Manufacturing is becoming there's just tons. There's something for everyone here, and there's a lot of money, as Jessica said. I'm at UC San Francisco. Our program is not nearly as big. But it's still big. We're planning to spend $12 billion over the next decade with new hospitals and research buildings and renovating our existing sites. We have one IPD project, which is in a pilot, and I'm hoping if it gets a little bit farther, we can open the floodgates and deliver a bunch of small projects with IPD. And my focus now is just trying to get trades on board earlier, experimenting with design build for MEP. Most of my projects right now are still design bid build. We go to OSHPD or HCI now, we get a permit, we bid it, we coordinate it, and we have a lot of disasters, honestly. And so hoping to change that. I think our partners are seeing some subtle changes, but we have a long way to go. And then I'll wrap up with saying, I think my biggest claim to fame of anything, not my parenting skills for those that were on during the break, is that I knew Felipe before he was famous, before he had a podcast. I should have got an autograph then. I probably can't afford it now.
It's still get one now. Yeah.
But I met him before the EBFC show. So, boom, I'm done. That's who I am. Good to be here.
Very good. You did not disappoint. Jessica, I think we both agree that he's okay. That was an okay. Yeah. So ladies and gentlemen, you're hearing the big numbers. I don't want anyone to think that the IPD is only for multi-billion-dollar projects, even though James and Jessica are bringing that knowledge. We're going to open it up.
Well, on that note, James, what were the smallest projects you did for IPD?
1.8 million, 3 million, 4 million, 6 million. So I will offer, though, that it wasn't the first job with the team. You know, there is a learning curve. So I wouldn't suggest that you pick a super small job for your first project. I also might suggest don't pick $1 billion job either. I think 10, 20, 30 million, that's like a good.
Yeah, my first one was 20 million for the owner. And I would say that was a good sweet spot.
Yeah, mine was 20 as well. 12 million was the design and construction value. That was there's enough money to make some mistakes along the way, but it was also short enough that you got done and you could move on.
That's great. No, for both of you, well, before we start into the questions we got prepared for your panel discussion, let's go with the easy question, softball question. You're going to drop a lot of wisdom and knowledge, and you're going to get people thinking, and they're going to want to probably contact you in the future. Since you're both unmuted, either one of you, what's the best way for people to contact you after today's session?
Find me on LinkedIn.
Yeah, LinkedIn.
There you go, people. Find them on LinkedIn by their first and last name, and it's right there. There's their pictures. That's definitely James's LinkedIn photo. Jessica, I think
I'll drop the links in a chat too.
There you go.
Thank you, Miliana. Such a giver, that guy. Okay, so Jessica, we're going to start with you first. And the first question that we're all dying to know is, what is it like to go from a high saturation integrated project delivery environment in the beautiful Golden State of California all the way back to the East Coast, your roots?
It's been interesting. I feel like I haven't fully reflected on it enough, but over the last year and a half, I've done a lot of reflection, and not even just in the transition to Merck, but also some presentations I was asked to give in the last, we'll say 3 years, telling some of the Southland story and, how people, the same question, how can people start their journeys and where they're going? And the observations I've come across as what relates, or what changed or what's different is, I think we had, and we didn't know about this, this wasn't designed to any knowledge that I'd been aware of. We had a good opportunity. Sutter Health had a good opportunity in Northern California. Sutter drove a lot of the first owner to embrace lean project delivery and how to do it differently. They had the opportunity to build off of a construction industry environment and space that was already doing design build pretty heavily with what happened in the semiconductor space. So Silicon Valley already had a lot of strong design build skill set and knowledge that gets to the trade level. In our own organization, you get to a point where on some of those projects, you couldn't complete design fast enough to get the buildings built at the timeline that the owners were looking for, without relying on the trades to complete some of the design aspects. So we had a good foundation, and we had organizations that did better at breaking down the silos between delivery and design internally of their own organizations. Now take that leap to IPD, and it's a little bit easier to move. Prefabrication was starting to come into play. Mostly, I was from a mechanical side, so all my examples will be mechanical, but like central plant piping, starting to do rack systems of joint pipes. So I think that all enabled some leaps into the IPD space. You already had design build kind of creates some level of interconnectedness with your other trades and general contractor and design partners. So making the leap to integrated project delivery wasn't as hard. And we were the people that started the companies that were on that journey, they already recognized there was frustration. That was actually one of the big conversations that we had with Sutter, is how frustrated we all were with how projects were being delivered currently and what we weren't able to achieve because of the various things that were getting in the way. Now you take that knowledge, and that grew over time, and I was there for 20 some years. We all evolved and learned together. And now when I shifted over to Merck, and Merck's been on their journey for probably 10, 15 years now. The benefit is they have a pretty embedded lean knowledge, lean manufacturing thinking in the organization. So then it's like, how do you make that leap to construction? But our supply chain hasn't been doing design build. So when you start asking people to come together earlier and trades to be onboarded earlier so that they can inform constructability and fabrication and better solutions, you're dealing with trades that haven't had that experience before. They didn't know how to do it. And engineering teams and design teams that weren't accustomed to having that trust that the teams have. And the teams need to have that good dialogue of, where are we putting too much safety factors? How do we do routing differently that meets the scope and intent of the system, but also provides better constructability? The other one that's been challenging is just, I came over during pandemic, so you add that into it. Getting people together in a room didn't exist. And we have, one of the differences that I'm realizing how impactful it is, we have a very large, in our manufacturing, the guts of our building is unique process equipment that our internal process teams design to figure out how to build the vaccine that we're trying to build, or the therapeutic. And that's sometimes unique, whether it's unique in its scale or unique in its in the process line and the manufacturing process. So trying to incorporate what we have to do internally versus what we have to do working with our external partners has been different. I feel like I could go on and on with the reflections. There's also, we have this is why we haven't made it to IPD 100% fully contracted IFOA yet. We have a procurement arm that is different than capital projects. So Sutter Health didn't have that challenge. UCSF has a different challenge in that they were a public entity. So James could probably talk about that. But like what I realize is everyone has a unique landscape that they have to navigate, and helping people understand where the value is and getting everyone focused in that direction can kind of help you weed through the uniqueness and say, okay, but what do we have in common, or what can we make better? That it doesn't matter if you, like a lot of times people said, well, we can't do healthcare, we can't do hospitals this way because we're not building cars, coming out of the Toyota strategy. Now I'm in an organization that's saying, well, we're not building hospitals, they're different. I did a lot of consulting with Google, and they're like, well, we're not building hospitals, we're building office buildings with people in that. And so and everyone has stakeholders internally, externally. So recognizing that you just have to work with the landscape you have and adjust to, and that the agility that they were talking about earlier is, how do you make it work and focus on the value there?
That's a great question for people listening in, especially our international guests. The United States is a giant country, and from the West Coast to the East Coast, like Jessica's hitting on, there's a saturation where the nexus point for integrated project delivery was in this northern part of California, where James and I still are today, as well as Crom. And so it's interesting to hear how, as you go from one geography, like Jessica said, to others going east, it's kind of different. And people are always, you're always going to face those that say, you know, this works great there, but it can't work here. But we hear the same thing in agility. All the agile coaches, anyone who's ever worked in that type of space hears exactly the same thing. This works great in software, can't possibly work in construction. This works great in IT, can't possibly work in hardware. All the same things over and over again. No, I loved you shared that experience. That was perfect. Jessica, you know, now thinking about that, and we're gonna let James just pace. Doing a great job, James. We'll come to you in just a second. I want to also ask you, you know, as you're making that transition, you've had all these experiences where you've had like the good way, like even what James talked about. He started off in the worst possible way, and then even having a good experience after that still felt like, oh my gosh, my job's in trouble. You know, what kind of challenges are you seeing as you're trying to apply integrated project delivery in your current environment now from the owner's perspective and no longer a trade contractor's perspective? Have you mentally made that complete shift yet?
I don't know that I can ever say I've made the shift until I have to be much further down the road. Like it, to James's point earlier, is like we've come so far in lean, and yet we have so much further to go. And I feel like you don't really appreciate the full journey until you get a lot further down the road. But I'm, you know, definitely recognizing the challenges in an owner environment, and more. I don't know if it's just an owner environment. It's a publicly controlled, you know, public company. It's a global company. So years ago at the Lean Construction Congress, I started a group called Advanced Practitioners. It just happened to be what it was called, but what it was an open space where all the geeky people that were practicing this, as James talked about, like I finally got in a club of the people who were thinking like me and wanting to talk about this more. I said, well, let's create a space where we can all talk about it and kind of work through some problems together. We're all in the same space, the same location at the same time. And one of the groups decided to go down the path of applying lean in different world cultures. And that, I don't think it resonated as much then as it does now with me. Of, you know, a lot of lean, you can trace its roots back to Deming and Ford and things in the US, but then, you know, it really got its huge thrust in Japan with Toyota and the Japanese culture. And then you take it to the construction industry and you've got a slightly different culture. And there's a lot to that. And I'm recognizing there's some uniqueness to, we've got key projects we're focusing on in the Northeast US, New Jersey area, Philadelphia area. They're slightly different cultures. Southeast US, Ireland, Germany. Like, so working with the different cultures has a tweak to it. It's also, the more people you're trying to swing and sway, it's not just the people at the front line on the project you're trying to sell on this new way of delivering work or encouraged to be along for the ride, but it's also the people that they report to internally and making sure that they're on board so they're not providing pushback. That was one of the big observations we had in the early part of the Sutter journey. Is there was oftentimes where you got the project manager on the project on board to doing it differently and had built the trust and have seen different ways of approaching challenges, whether it's target value delivery or production planning with last planner, and, you know, choosing who to go first and giving up some of your most efficient method to do something that optimizes the whole. And you realize that then they get pushback from their main office on, don't do it that way because that messes with our whole system. And so realizing you have to bring different people into the journey, and coming to a space and a culture and a company that hasn't been on the same journey that a lot of us in Northern California have been, you have to figure out a way for them to experience the journey. And so what I'm trying to do now is, how do we get people to have what James and I had in a 10 to 20 year time frame and experience and learning? How do you compress those experiences so you can get momentum faster?
That's perfect. And I've got I've got some questions in the chat that we're going to come to. There is an onboarding question that I'm going to bring forward. Thank you, Willie and Shmuel, for the question. And Bruce, we're going to get to your questions in just a second. I want to shift now to James, and we'll come back to that onboarding thing and come back to Jessica in a second. James, you know, a lot of people, we started the opening here with Cromwell's famous, you know, what problem Taiichi was trying to solve, and Miljan did a great job of talking about what was the genesis of that for them starting all those years ago, all those decades ago. Can't even believe it was like over 50 years ago. How time flies. But James, from your perspective, what does IPD solve in terms of problems? Can you elaborate, please, on how you personally benefited from that solution? As you mentioned, the contract that was thrust upon you all those years ago.
So what problem? So let's be, so design and construction, I think from a contracting point of view, has evolved over the last 50 years or 100 years. Like if you go back and look at the Empire State Building construction, it's like they figured out a bunch of stuff that we're relearning today. I think they essentially had a tech plan. They had a concurrent design with engineering. They had a ton of prefabrication. I was just reading about that over the last week, and amazing. They were adding floors during design because there was this competition of who had the tallest building. And somewhere along the line, we as owners decided that we could get projects done better by chunking them up into packages and trying to get the lowest price for those packages. And I think that there was also, we wanted to try to limit the financial impact of a failure on a project. So we're transferring risk, and then our general contractors got really, really good at doing the same thing, chunking up the jobs and further transferring the risk and further transferring the risk. And I think we've gotten away from putting a team together to build a project. Like we didn't necessarily realize it, but that's what's happened. And so projects are structured now where essentially they're financed and the risk is held at the least sophisticated, least capitalized people on the team, right? We've got it all the way out to the smallest partners, and they're carrying the risk. And then you've got, you know, no offense to the GCs, but the GCs are administrators. They're not running and coordinating work like I'm generalizing, obviously. There's some,
and maybe the traditional GCs, right, James? Because I think some are realizing their new role.
I would say I have yet to meet a company that is consistent. I've met people that run work differently, but regardless of what the marketing says, I think that we have a long way to go, but I take responsibility. It's the owner's fault. The owners are getting exactly what they asked for. Let's be clear about
I'm not
that.
even offended yet, James. So
Yeah.
You're not even on shaky waters yet. Keep going.
So as owners, we've chunked up the work, and we've separated design from construction. And then I think the other thing I would add is our buildings are so incredibly specialized now that you have to chunk up the design and the construction. There's not many companies that could do self-perform the level of complexity that all of these systems require. And for a hospital, but it's similar for others. I don't think that there's any one person anymore that actually knows how the whole building works, right? You're coordinating specialists, and just building controls is incredibly complex. And then you have complex systems. And anyway, a fractured delivery model to deliver something that's highly complex, that has to be uniquely designed. Like, how do we expect that to work? It's an uphill battle all the way. And then the other piece to that is our contracts force people to cover themselves and protect themselves. They actually say, like, hey, you need to notify me. You need to not do any work unless you've confirmed that you're going to get paid for it. I'm going to make you do a bunch of work that you're not going to get paid for. And then you GCs, I'm going to run a separate set of books, and I'm going to also make you pay for other people's work that you definitely didn't include in your bid. so it's set up, the rules of the game are set up to be adversarial. And so a good contractor will be a difficult partner. Like a sophisticated, well-run company will actually be a difficult partner because they have to be. So that was a long way of just kind of analyzing the framework as I think of it today. IPD tries to get away from that and tries to say, okay, we're now going to build a team whose job is to deliver a completed building that meets the owner's intended purpose. So if you, Howard Ashcraft pointed at, and probably Will Lichtig first, in any traditional set of design and construction contracts, there's nobody actually responsible for delivering a complete building. Even the contractor's job is to deliver per the plans and specifications that are designed by somebody else. There's nobody's job to actually say, I'm going to give you something that works. And when you buy a car, you know that you're going to get a car that works, right? The manufacturing process is set up to design and deliver things that work. In the building process, you know, it's, I don't even know if it's good as a coin toss if you're going to get what you wanted when you started. So the nuts and bolts, and there's case studies. I'd encourage you to look at some of the case studies on the leanipd.com for that, because we can't go into all the details, but at a high level, IPD ties design and construction and the owner to a collective outcome. And that when the job is delivered well and it works and it's ahead of schedule and it's delivered under budget, everybody gets all their profit plus a bonus for essentially, you know, excellent performance. When the project doesn't go well, it doesn't matter whose fault. If there's a mistake on the job or an error or an omission or a miscoordination, the entire team pays to fix that issue. And so what you find is that, there's case studies on this, when there's a big problem on a traditional job, everybody's required to put up their hands and make sure that they don't get blamed for it. Where on an IPD job, it doesn't matter whose fault it is, everyone's going to pay for it. So you find everybody swarms together and they try to figure out how quickly and how cost effectively can we resolve this issue so we don't have a delay to the job. So if you've read Nassim Taleb's book, Anti-Fragile, he makes this case about the opposite of fragile. Fragile is something when stressed, it gets weaker, right? A glass, it shatters. Anti-fragile, most people would say the opposite of fragile is like robust or strong. He argues there isn't actually a word, which is why he calls it anti-fragile, is what is something that when stressed gets stronger. And so he uses case studies like the human body is something that when it gets stressed, it gets stronger. When you get a cold, you build antibodies and you're stronger in the future if it doesn't kill you. I believe that IPD teams within the contract structure is as close as you get to anti-fragile. And I've seen it firsthand. When you stress an IPD team, they actually get better. They communicate more. They process information quicker. They make decisions faster. They get more innovative. That was a really long answer, but that's I think the secret sauce to IPD. And it's also why I think you're fooling yourselves if you don't do the business part and you call it IPD light. You're not building an anti-fragile team. You're using lean processes with a CM at risk contract. That's what you do. Just got to realize that's what you're doing. It works until it doesn't. Done.
James he's out there with the gloves off. First blow right to the GC face, and then he came in 1-2 punch right back to the owner, punched himself and said it's because of the environment that we created. No, that was a good answer. And I think it transitions well into, you told us, you know, the problems that it's definitely solving, and you hinted at some of the things that are used even in agile practices like swarming to solve problems. But I want to shift back to Jessica. Jessica, you know, we've heard from James and yourself a bit about, you know, why you both are so committed to IPD. What practices support making the jump from the traditional contract type to going to IPD? What are some things you'd recommend to people listening to all this great opportunity?
Well, and I think James hit on it. If you can shift the contract, I haven't seen anything closer to a silver bullet than that, of shifting behaviors faster. And especially when we did a lot, most of the projects I did when the contract was new to the team, we did a lot of education and learning about what does the contract mean? How does it work? How is this different? How do you as an organization benefit from it? So I think there's a lot to be understood in that, but that's the quickest one. And then the other ones that I find are really valuable is bringing the team together, starting to build, like you can look up any 1,000 different ways of building a team. So you have a common purpose, a common vision, you build trust, you figure out what systems and structures you're going to use for decision-making and communication and progressing work and making those decisions collectively. And as you're doing it, starting every experience, every situation has the opportunity to build or deteriorate your trust. And or maybe I should start shifting this to building or creating more fragile or anti-fragile solution, like every opportunity. So it takes some discipline around focusing on that before and during while you're working on cost, schedule, scope, all the things that are taking a lot of focus especially at the early part of the project. Education, I think, is huge, is teaching people what we're trying to accomplish. Why are we doing last planner versus CPM scheduling? Why are we doing target value delivery versus whatever we did before? What are we truly trying to get out of it versus just change for change's sake? And then the other one that I find hugely powerful and is really tough, especially I think in the US culture, maybe others, is creating that culture of reflection and learning that plan, do, check, adjust cycle. And sometimes it's the small iterative improvements. Oftentimes it's the small iterative improvements that get you your monumental shifts over time. So, how can you make the work life a little bit better? How can you make your scheduling a little bit better? How can you make your meetings a little bit better? And you do that day in and day out. And across all of that, you start getting to solving problems faster, more efficiently, better outcomes.
Oh, that's a fantastic answer, Jessica. And I think you gave good possibilities to everybody listening, no matter if it's the first time you're ever hearing about integrated project delivery. To those of you that have already dabbled in some other opportunities and you've had the good fortune of being on an IPD contracted job with shared risk. I want to shift back to James. James, just to let people know, you mentioned IPD light as like in a negative way. Can you expand a little bit of what is IPD light? And for those of you that are ESL, I'm using light, LITE, and this is some lean slang in the communities. This is jargon that James is going to unpack for us.
Well, just to disclose my bias up front, I'm not necessarily a big fan, and I'll tell you why.
Perfect. Yeah, tell us why.
So here's my analysis or my view of what people are doing. So people want their project owners, they want their projects to go better. Contractors, want to say that they're doing IPD, but they don't want to change the contract model for whatever reason, whether it's a procurement department, a legal department. Frankly, if you're an owner and you've been at your place for a long time and you've been successful, it's more of a risk to change your delivery model than to just get poor outcomes, because poor outcomes are kind of expected and we're used to it. And there's not an expectation that we're going to get something different. So IPD Light, what I've seen is people want, and owners especially, they want the collaboration, but they don't want to change the business model. So they say, okay, we're going to collaborate. We're going to do a big room. We're going to require last planner or, agile planning methodology. We're going to work together. We're going to intend to have decisions based on consensus, so that sometimes it's a rider to a contract. But at the end of the day, it's almost always a CM at risk contract with very specific terms and conditions of a CM at risk contract. And then the trades are brought on board either with a GMP, but often their hard bid is a lump sum, but then they all agree to collaborate. And I sometimes push back and say, so it's IPD light because you're going to collaborate on this one? That's what you're saying? You're going to work together to try to get the project done for me as opposed to what you usually do? I would also say that a lot of design and construction partners, they've been telling me all along that we already do IPD. We've always done IPD. This is just how we work as a firm. And I would tell you that everyone says that until they actually do an IPD project. And then they say, okay, it's not true. It's different. And I had a boss at Sutter who was adamant that they had done a very successful big hospital project for UCSF, actually, where with big room, a lot of lean practices and incentives for performing well together. And they had said that's the same as IFOA until they delivered a hospital with an IFOA, and they were like, it's night and day different. So all I can offer is like, until you've tried it, you can't see it. IPD light, I think it works, like I said before, until it doesn't. At the end of the day, if you're bidding your trades, if something really goes wrong, I made a note that you've seen that graphic, buildings leak at the intersection of contracts. The problem is when projects fail, it's not obvious usually who screwed up. If it's obvious who screwed up, then there's insurance in place and you know what to do. But it's almost never obvious who screwed up. And that the problem is the owner loses because nobody can do the work until they know whose fault it is. Right? That's whose fault is it? Nobody's moving until you know whose fault it is. And I think that's the problem. And people say, well, I had a great project with IPD Light. Yeah, I've had great design bid build projects with zero implementation of lean. Before I knew what it was, I bid projects and they went well. But when they don't go well, you really feel it. So I would say to the owners, if you're going to do one project, sure, put your best people on it, pay a lot of attention to it. You've got a chance of it being successful. If you're going to deliver $20 billion worth of work, I promise you're going to have some major failures in there because there's not enough good people to run these jobs with their complexity. You need the design and construction team on your side, right? The worst partners, when I said like the most sophisticated contractors are the worst partners in a lump sum environment because they kick your butt, they bury you in paperwork, and they outwork you and they outthink you. In IPD, those people are on your team. Like they're out protecting you, going after everybody else. It's night and day different.
That's beautiful. A follow-up question to that. And for those of you listening, IFOA is integrated form of agreement. It is that high collaboration contract type. And there are a few out there alternatives for those. And some of those you can get publicly in preview. So you can start to pepper your potential favorite clients with, or if you're a client, you can start looking into that. But James, I want to just tag on to that. You mentioned that, and I totally agree with your response, full agreement. Now that we're on the same page, how can partners best prepare to support one of your IPD projects? Let's say there's a company coming and they've already, you're gone past you don't do it like you say you do. This is your first time. What's something that they can do to prepare for an IPD project? What would you recommend? And then I'll go to Jessica with the same question.
Yeah, let me hit on one thing you just said. You said the IFOA is a collaborative contract. I think you could make the case that the IFOA just ties design and construction together and puts their profit at risk. The outcome of that is people collaborate. I don't think you can contractually require collaboration. And I know that for sure, because the first IPD jobs that I did, sure, we tied everybody together, but everybody acted exactly the same as they usually do. So it's actually, I thought it would be automatic once you tie profit at risk to the outcome that you would get different behaviors, and you don't. You actually have to work on that. You have to build a culture. You have to remind people, keep pointing back to hey, remember your profits at risk. Remember how this deal works. Yep. So that's the lead in to answer your question. I think to survive in a different environment where you're focused on efficiency and innovation, the traditional models of like bidding a plan, spec, scope and then delivering on that is not what the owner is looking for. And so a lot of IPD jobs, when you get started, the mechanical contractor comes to the table and they say, okay, when you have a set of drawings, I'll tell you how much it costs. They don't get that, like, no, you're at the table early because you're expected to bring ideas and to participate in the project and to say, hey, if you use this system, we can do it 25% faster. So it's the message I'm trying to communicate here is like, think like an owner. Think about if this project were to be the best project we'd ever done, what would need to happen? What tools could we bring to the table? What unique thing? In some ways, be selfish. Say, if you designed it this way, then we could do the job better instead of just sitting back and waiting for the design to be done and then estimating it, because that's not why you're there early. What Jessica did at Southland, I think is amazing. They became actually the preferred. I would pick Southland before I would pick a general contractor, because I knew that if I had Southland and a strong electrical, I could get collaboration on the job regardless of who the GC was. And I did it multiple times because I cheated at Sutter. We had a policy where I had to do an RFP for general contractors, but I could hand select, but it didn't say anything about the trade. So I hand selected collaborative trades, but there's not that many out there. So in this new world, think about yourself as a service provider and an expert in your scope, and how can you bring that to the very front end of a team? And if you're just waiting to price documents, then you're not a value add to the team, and they're going to go with someone else. But that's work. You got to work. I mean, it's not going to come by accident. You know, Southland, I think, invested a tremendous amount of money in people and process work to change the way, and they get hired like by owners, even when they're not on the job, to change culture. That's, Bill Seed would call it a big L, you know, that if you put these lean specialists on your team, they're going to bring the rest of the team along. So be the big L.
I love it. Thank you. Jessica, please add to how can people best prepare to support one of your current or future IPD projects?
Gosh, I was thinking that, and James hit on so much of it. I had like, understand what the owner values. If you don't know it today, go ask them. What is important to them? What is it critical to their success? And invest in that. And I actually had invest in people. I think that's a huge one. So once you understand what is valuable, develop it. So more cost certainty, more schedule certainty. That's where prefabrication has a lot of benefits in the quality and the safety of the product, but it also has more certainty to the outcome earlier in the project. So you have reliability, your risk drops. So figuring out those solutions earlier and investing in the skill sets, being good, like James was talking about that 50% set of design drawings and how do you estimate it? People who can conceptually engineer and estimate a product is a very unique skill set still this day. Truly can frame it and build it. And I remember at Southland when we were looking at developing more people in that vein, it was a 7 to 10 year development cycle to get them the design and the construction experience with the mindset of being able to be conceptual. And not everyone who goes through the journey is going to be good at it. So it's starting with a large swath of people and then narrowing it down. I think the other one that's gotten a lot of recognition is developing leadership skills with your people. So how do you become a better team player? And James talked about that big L partner, to quote Bill Seed. That's someone who has not just the lean knowledge. We had little L partners. People are along for the ride. They're willing to do what you say you're going to do. I'm going to participate in last player. No, these are big L's are the ones that are going to be advocates for the project, advocates for the owner's direction as it relates to lean project delivery. This is not the owner is always right, customer is always right solution. It's advocating for the best outcome and driving that not just within your own organization, but looking at it holistically. So connecting, looking at how are other people projecting their costs and therefore their schedule and their staffing and their material. Are they doing it effectively and efficiently? What can we learn from each other? We took a lot from the sprinkler trades in their kitting and fabrication. We gave a lot to other trades in how they could learn from what we were doing to better have reliability. Because if we get reliability, we get that flow, we get that better scheduling. We start eliminating a lot of the waste that just goes hidden in this industry. And then if you want to be on one of our projects and doing it, I think it's not just always recognizing. I think someone caught this in the chat too. Bruce caught it. Is like, it's not about the A team. It's not presenting, oh, my team's the best at this, this, and this. I think it's about the growth mindset team. It's the team that is open to learning and reflecting, because that team you'll be able to take so much further than the I've done this before, I can do it again. Here's my resume. But more about I'm willing to learn and I want to try something different and I'm willing to push the boundaries, but they have to have enough knowledge to share what the risk is of those decisions so that you're making informed decisions.
I love that, Jessica. So from James, we heard be selfish and come prepared, get prepared. And Jessica reinforced it's going to be give yourself some runway to get on a learning path. And I just want to show Milian that we stayed in our time box, baby. Give it up to this amazing panel here. That is perfectly coming into our time box. Now we're going to pivot to questions from the audience. We've got some have come in directly. And please, if you've got questions for James and Jessica, continue to pepper the Zoom chat. I'm going to start off with one that's going to go in order from my buddy, Willie, in all the way over in across the pond. He says, what is the mindset change required for new teams initiating an IPD project, especially if their lean or agile mindset is also new to them potentially? How, from your experiences, does Sutter, UCSF, and Merck onboard new team members into this way of thinking and doing? And we'll go to Jessica first, since you look prepared. You look more prepared than James. So James, I'm buying you time.
I don't know. I think James might have it more here because I'm still building that. But getting people to shift their mindset, I think you have to bring them together and talk about it and not just present content, but it's an aspect of presenting and discussion. And I think there's a lot gained when you ask people what they're most frustrated with, like, especially when I worked with our foreman, we tried not to push things if this is the way you should do it. We tried to solve their problems. So when they got frustrated over certain things, that's the opportunity to deliver an idea of a better way, and then encourage trying it and reflecting. So I want to have more conversations with our partners on what's not working on their past projects and how do we do it better on this project.
Jessica, you were here in my expectations for that answer and you delivered here. So James, the bar is set really high. What do you do to onboard new people that might be new to IPD or new to lean and agile?
I don't have a good answer, honestly. If I did, yeah. Okay, now that I've got the bar lower.
And now the bar is lower. Let's see what you got.
So I'll start with our own team first. I've actually kind of struggled with people that have been here for a long time, that were here before I got here, because they've delivered a lot of projects. You know, there's very few projects that are half built in this country, right? They get done. And so they look back and they say, we've delivered a bunch of projects. And I was trying to get across with, yeah, but at what cost, right? It's that thought of, what are your pain points? What I've really found with internal staff is some of our newer people are interested. And the way I've done that is like, one of our directors went to LCI when it was virtual and came back and excited. And the team really wanted to hear from her what her thoughts were. And when she started sharing what she had got out of it, then they started getting excited. What we're doing is we're just slightly modifying. We're trying to use best value for onboarding people, for selecting contractors. And what we're finding, so we're scoring really highly. What's your project approach? How are you going to approach keeping this project on budget during design? And what lean practices are you going to bring to get this job coordinated? Because most of our projects are renos and operating hospitals. They're really difficult projects. And what we're finding, so the teams are, the PMs are learning as they're crafting this, and they're also learning based on, we have some really sophisticated contractors that are proposing. And then once we're getting them on board, they're not necessarily doing it. Or they're saying, we did best value. And then the contractor, as soon as they got on board, said, okay, but how do I estimate the rest of the scope if I don't have anything to bid? And so it's more about educating, and I'll say that what we're doing is framing problems and then giving people space to try to come up with the solutions. And we're changing the problems that we're framing. We're getting away from getting a coordinated set of plans that we could bid to how do we get the trades on board earlier so that they can be part of the coordination and part of the permit set. And I would say we're just creating those conversations now. So we haven't figured out how to do them quickly and effectively. They're just starting. And we have a long way to go, as I said, but people are thinking now, they're going, oh, wait a minute. So what do we do here? And what I know is there's an incredible body of knowledge of how to do this. It's more like Jessica said, how do we get them in a year or 18 months to go through what took us 15 years to learn? Because the body of knowledge is developed and you can't throw it all out there. So you start at the beginning and you ask questions and you create scenarios. And then when people say, okay, I got that, but now I'm stuck here, you can introduce a new concept. Have you thought about this? I'm going to try to send 5 of our new PMs to LCI this year, because I know they'll just come back jazzed and excited.
So that reminds me, if I may just jump in, like a couple of things, and as the discussion has been kind of progressing, like it's just, there's a lot of resemblance, a lot of same challenges that we face in like other industries, not just, so like, I think, what we do to onboard, like for instance, I shared a link here for this team canvas, just aligning team around like, what is the purpose, common goals, and something like this to help the team align. But it's also a really good discussion for new hires. And I tell people you can design your own canvas, but it's about building that shared understanding. Another thing that we do is pair people. Like, there's this concept of pair programming in software development. I think that's something that you can use, pair people up. That's a great way to cross-train. And maybe last thing that we do is take people through some type of quick training and then have them apply that immediately. So a lot of times people come with different backgrounds and they might say, oh, I know Scrum or I know Agile, whatever it is, but actually getting them for even like half a day just to realign and make sure that they're talking about the same thing is also helpful for a team. So maybe.
That's beautiful. And Milian, if you could drop that in the chat for people, the link to that team canvas is a nice lead behind. That'd be much appreciated. I just want to go back to, perfect. Thank you. I want to go back to James for just a second and say, James, that's where you ended up. You took it right to the top, and you're right at the same.
I cheated a little, huh?
Yeah, totally. Well done. I'll go. We've got another great question in the chat, and the questions are still coming in. This one's from Shmuel. He said, according to the two of your both experiences, governments, as far as other official authorities, can support practical development agility approaches in different systems and management process. Are you seeing support from authorities having jurisdiction, or is it more policy inside your organizations? Where is this practical support and development coming from your perspective right now?
Well, we're a public agency. we're a little bit unique. The University of California follows the public contracting code unless something else is deemed to be in the best interest of the university, which is how we were able to show that an IFOA on a $4 billion job is probably the better approach. As far as specific agile practices or bringing last planner, I can only offer what we're starting to do, which is best value is a recognized selection methodology within public agencies in the United States. And within best value, you can score it however you want. And so we're leaning heavily to individual team members scoring that high and project approach. And what we're saying, again, to this question thing of how are you going to make sure that design stays on budget? How are you going to implement the schedule on this project? How are you going to make sure that the permitted plans are fully coordinated and minimize RFIs? And so my intent to all the contractors out there is to then hold you to your proposed approach. It's not just to win the job. That becomes, because my contract is a contract. It's not a project delivery manual. So I'm trying to do this to get the teams to develop a project delivery manual that they bring to the job. And I think, LCI is working on a certification for lean construction. The goal in the future is that owners like the Green Build LEED certification, that we actually make that into a way that owners can ask for that certification as part of a pre-qualification or selection. I don't think that's going to change the world, but it'll make it part of the conversation much more than it is today. So those are some of the approaches. I got a note, OSHPD or HCI now, they actually officially recognize integrated project delivery. And if you're doing a job over $100 million with integrated project delivery, they will allow you to collaboratively negotiate the review durations and submittal dates, meeting dates, back check dates for an entire project up front. So we did this in Roseville with 6 packages. We negotiated something like 20 dates 2.5 years ahead of time. And we hit almost every single date. And when we weren't hitting them, OSHPD, we would talk to them. We're going to be a week late, or they would say, we just had a big thing. Can we push this out a week? But it was a way different experience than on traditional jobs. I think every single package came back 1 back check earlier than expected.
It's incredible. Yeah, that's perfect. Let's end it on that one for you. And how about let's go to you, Jessica. How do you see governance helping or and encouraging?
I would have to say I would be building off of the experiences James just explained with OSHPD. I haven't connected much with the AHJs, nor have I heard that being as big of a roadblock for us on our project execution as it is on, I think OSHPD is the best example of a horror story turned, on the path of success story.
Yeah, that's a great case study.
I've heard.
Get that on the website, James. We want to read that case study you just talked about, right, Jessica? Let's add to the work that James has to do for the future. We're going to go back to you, Jessica. I got a question from Bruce. Bruce says, "Hi, Jessica."
Hi, Bruce.
He said, "Do you manage the Merck decision-making process approval? And if you do, are there constraints to design flow with the design build teams?"
Yes, as you expect there would be. What we're trying to do is building off of, was it Anton earlier, we're bringing choosing by advantages into the organization for decision-making, better decision-making, hopefully more durable, longer lasting decisions. There's an element of, and James has mentioned this in other presentations, of the people that you work with at the project level from the owner side are just the head of the supply chain. There's a whole host of people behind that are truly the end users of the product. And there's a lot to pull them together, and there's a lot of competing perspectives and stakeholder opinions. So decisions are complicated and complex, depending, or both. So choosing by advantages kind of brings some transparency and visibility to that decision making, and recognizing that you'll have the exact same data for the same decision on 2 different locations. You might decide something different. You might make a different decision, but at least they're well informed, and they're hopefully going to be able to stand the test of time. The other thing that I think as an industry we have to get better at is not expecting our owners to make decisions instantaneously. We have a lot of people to pull together. So the more heads up we have on when major decisions are and what their last responsible moment is, so that we can start informing it and starting having the conversations of what's the information you need to make this decision. I think that's where the design and build teams, and myself included when I was working in that space, we failed our owners by giving them the asking the questions sooner than when we realized they were needed.
Perfect. We've got we still got 4 gigantic minutes left. Ladies and gentlemen, if we run out of time and we don't get to your question, I encourage James and Jessica to go through the chat at the cutoff point and give you a nice response. But let's go to Randall. Randall's got a question here. I'm going to throw it to James. How does IPD drive the reality that we must design through efficient inputs available to us at the given time and point? At a given time and point, excuse me.
Well, I think if set up well, this for any project, you get the owner to clarify up front what their values are, what they're trying to accomplish with the project. And then if putting everyone's profit at risk, where you have, if you design a project that doesn't meet those goals, is a good way to get people's attention. I think then you need good systems to make sure that you're keeping up on the budget, that conceptual estimating concept. So I'd advocate for, risk and opportunity log being the name I would call it, but continual estimating that's not based on the evolution of the plans, but don't draw anything unless you've already confirmed it's in the budget. That's the opposite of, doing a takeoff of a set of plans. I don't know that I'm answering exactly what you wanted from that question, but I think that's at least that was what comes to my mind when you ask that question.
No, I think that's a novel response. That's good. And I'm going to go to Renee. I see your hand, Bruce. I see your wave. We'll come to you, Bruce, if we have time. But we've got a couple more questions that came in. Jessica, this is from Renee. Do you have any change managers in your organization now? Do you mandate for your IPD projects? And if you do you also require that they have construction backgrounds?
So I'm not sure if I'll answer all this, but I chuckle because we have an internal community of practice for the projects that are delivering in our Transform network, and we're doing an update on our change management strategy and helping people understand. So we've got within the organization people that are trained in change management and within our leadership, and not necessarily like we're trying to, I don't know that we would say we have some people on our projects and they come from a construction, so it's more they had the construction background and then we added the change knowledge to it, but it's also there's a resource. That's one of the nice things of working for such a large organization is you have a lot of internal support resources that you can pull in as needed to help coach and guide on different strategies, and that's one of them.
Perfect. Thank you, Jessica. And how about you, James? Do you have change managers in UCSF, or are you mandating certain type of training for your IPD projects, and do you require construction backgrounds for those folks?
So I kind of alluded to this earlier. What I've found is it's not so much people that are given the title of change manager. What I'm finding is who are the people that are interested in change and that it gets them excited and they're motivated. Jessica didn't get tapped for that role at Southland because someone thought it would be a good idea. I think she created the role and showed why it was important and then got the title later, essentially, and maybe had to bill less of her time over time when there's a recognition of the value. So what I'm doing is I'm looking for the people that are genuinely inspired on my teams and then providing them with resources like check out this training, I think long-term, I'm going to try to just take courses that are already available. Like there's a lot of webinar content and on-demand and YouTube videos, and kind of put together at a high level what I think the knowledge steps should be, so that I can give that to PMs when they reach these. What I want to create is they think about something and then they get to a roadblock and they say, okay, I've discovered this problem. And then you can offer resources for that. But if they don't discover the problem for themselves, and there's no value in the resource doesn't really sink in. So I'm not one of just go to 50 trainings. Maybe
perfect.
that's the wrong approach.
No,
I'll
it's
let you
not
know.
Yeah,
in
and
years.
I would echo that with James. We've talked about this, and it makes it a lot harder as leaders and people trying to support it, is how do you create that timeliness and connectedness? And I think that's where Bruce mentioned somewhere in there about, coaches are critical, and there's a lot of awareness to that these days in this space around the value of having coaches. And if you think about any professional CEO, and they have coaches in their corner. You think of every athlete out there at the professional level, they have coaches and trainers, people who can, when they see the problem, are right there to help them with ideas and thoughts, or to research and help them through it if there's not an instant solution. And the more we can create that comfort level, that's not, you're not that. We created an industry where we prided and recognized people who were good at fighting fires, and we ended up with what we call it, like serial arsonists or something along those lines.
It's perfect. And I want to just respect the time box. We're about to transition to a break, but I'll give each of you 30 seconds of any last things that we should be aware of on the horizon that's important to you. We'll go to James first, since Jessica just went.
All right. One, I advocate for coaches too, because we're so lean. It's hard to improve things while you're stuck in the middle of it, or write it up as a policy when you're working on the job. If you're interested in integrated project delivery, and we didn't get into the details enough for you, leanipd.com has a lot of free content on there, case studies. There's a blog. If you're interested in more formal training, like with a certificate, lean-ipd.org. lean-ipd.org offers more of a focus, more like courses, online courses that are on demand. There's 4 hours of webinars on there, but there's also an intro to integrated project delivery that's based on IPD and Action Guide for Leaders. We launched it last week in collaboration with the Integrated Project Delivery Alliance in Canada. And so I think that's a great onboarding tool for IPD teams, and that's what it's created for. It's about 2.5 hours and pretty well edited production value. I'll put it in the chat.
Yeah, put it in the chat, James. And how about you, Jessica? And I'll shamelessly plug Jessica, what she thinks about this. She's collaborated on several publications that are all fantastic. Anything with her name on it is a must read for me. So Jessica, what do you recommend for people as well that they should be looking out for?
So James hit on a lot of the IPD stuff. I'll hit on just lean construction, like LCI, community of practices. Get involved locally with others in your area that are looking for a different way, and you learn from each other. Get involved with, there's the Lean Congress. They have a lot of e-learning and content there. So yeah, just get like that 70-20-10 model of adult education. 10% is formal learning, all the things we just shared. 20% is through your network, whether it's coaches or peers. And then 70% is practice. Go out and do it. So like everything we've talked about has an element that you can do within your own sphere of influence. If you're the only one in your organization who's thinking this way, there's stuff you can do in your self work. If you've got an organization that's trying to do it, but you haven't found the owner and the other partners, there's a lot you can do within your own organization. Just work with what you can do in your sphere of influence.